Welcome to the 7th consecutive month of a Xenia series in the anthropology of travel, tourism, and pilgrimage. What a delight to have you joining us today, as many of you have been here from the beginning. Every week, or every month rather, that we offer this, we find new friends and new people to join us from all different walks of curiosity, so to speak. Today, Dr. Bonfanti is going to give a very relevant and I feel very personally connective talk, and Tom Selwyn will introduce her shortly. I wanted to just say to everybody out there, happy World Anthropology Day. We decided not to advertise that in advance. We didn't want you to feel that you had to dress up for this or to shower us with gifts or in any way do anything different. But today it is that glorious day of the year, Anthropology Day. We all are celebrating in our own special ways as seems appropriate. So thank you for that. And we look forward to hearing from you through Xenia website, how you celebrated. We're all very, very curious. The other big news is that as this is the 7th of our series, we now have enough historical content and future content to embark on putting these out through audio, through what I believe the kids call these days a podcast. And so later in the month, we will be getting with those logistics, and we encourage you to tune in to listen to some of the highlights of past speakers as well as others. And as we will continue to get used to working from Zoom and working from our computers in these difficult months ahead, you can look for some innovations of how we distribute our material coming up. So with that, to introduce Dr. Sara Bonfanti is Tom Selwyn. Tom, take it away.
Thank you very much, Jeff, and very special welcome to Sara. I could say welcome to London, except that really it's not quite London. It's also Bethlehem, it's also New Hampshire, Malta, Italy, and many other places in the world. As Sara might have it, simply together as colleague scholars. Sara is with us as part of a reciprocal relationship, as I think Jeff may have mentioned, between our SOAS-related Xenia team and her team in Trento in Italy. Both of us thinking through the meanings and practices of home and homing. Homing is a favorite word of Sara's, I think, reading her work. The reciprocity follows from Sara's invitation to Safet and myself to visit her team in Trento on the 23rd of November 2020. The two of us spoke about our edited and authored books, namely Traveling Towards Home, which I edited with Nicola Frost, and Safet's Waiting for Elijah. I'll just show you one image of this, if you can see that. Shared screen. How's that?
That looks good.
Is that better even?
Yeah.
Okay, so that is the PDF which advertises our series, which is called Articulating Journeys, Festivals, Memorials, and Homecomings. And so far we have 3 books. As you see, they're Traveling Towards Home, which I edited with Nicola. The Rite of Urban Passage, which is written by our colleague Reza Massoudi, and actually the first one in the series, Waiting for Elijah, Time and Encounter in a Bosnian Landscape. And these 3 books and this series actually very much joins up, I think, the relationship between us and Sara. In their different and respective ways, both of our books, that's Safet and mine, speak about being at home and also speak about separation, often forced separation, and post-separation, dreams, realities, and necessities of making and recovering home. Sara and her colleagues and we at Xenia start and finish with the commitment to having a home as a principal human right. Of Sarah's many writings, I will introduce her by mentioning very briefly three. First, her study about the relation between home and smell, which she describes as whiffs. And I will say, I will use that word as well. Second, her contribution to Ethnographies of Home and Mobility, which she entitled Shifting Roofs. And thirdly, her own powerfully intimate reflections on the London area of Southall, part of the project of neighbourhood projects gathered together and edited by Sarah and her colleagues. In Whiffs, Sarah argues, very interestingly, that by focusing on smell, we can reveal forms of homemaking in migratory contexts. She argues that olfactory research is one aspect of an anthropology of the senses, and we might be prompted to recall Emma's talk about hair as another such sensuous anthropological investigation. Sarah tells us of two contradictory trajectories that flow from whiffs of food preparation in European cities. One that speaks of the connections that food production and the associated smells can enable cooks and their families to make, remember, and imagine relations between their diasporic homes and their homes across the sea. But another that speaks of the hostility provoked by smells associated with an imagined other. In Sarah's words, to quote her, the divisive quality of food smells can lead to forms of discrimination, xenophobia, and racism. In her Shifting Roofs text, Sarah and her colleagues demonstrate how, to quote them, the idea of home offers a privileged entry into forced migration, diversity, and inequality. She argues quite rightly, in our view, and with an attention to detail rather than to generalization, that being attentive to mobility at large and in a many layered fashion is a way to de-migranticize migration studies. As she puts it herself, the migrant condition is not a social reality in itself. And indeed, we in our Xenia series, in our Xenia team and in our summer school team, learned that very quickly in 2019 when we went to the Migration Museum in London, and very, very quickly realized, I think it took about 2 minutes, that we are all in many ways migrants ourselves. There is no such thing as a migrant house or a migrant home on the one hand, and an essentialized native home or house on the other. And Sarah guides us to focusing on homes that, in her words, quote, lie at the basis of our everyday lives, whether as place, as an experience, or as the search or struggle for it. Sarah's research in Southall in London, Chota Punjab, offers a really, in the words of the editor of the series in which that study falls, to quote, a delicate ethnographic portrait which follows the trajectories of a variety of diverse locals, marginal youths, pious elders, entrepreneurs, homeless persons, their diverging and converging paths reshaping the frames of this fabled London ghetto. And I must say that her writing in that particular ethnographic study is absolutely beautiful. And it shows us, I think, that our research can indeed be extremely personal, as hers is there, but also composed in a way that is that from a literary point of view is beautiful and attracting. As she puts it, disembarking the Tata shuttle train from Paddington, one's ears throb with Eastern words gushed in London's far west. Eyes fill up with strings of Punjabi script, signposted on every step, nostrils replenished with extant curry and frankincense, coal and rubber from deserted factories. Everyday life in any given neighborhood is a matter of senses. Finally, the last two sentences in this introduction. Sara offers us a uniquely sensitive entry into research about the nature of home and homing. Her work within a team of colleagues also offers us examples of how to work collectively, underpinned by personal openness and collective dedication to uncovering the profound differences and even more similarities between the ways in which we compose and live our life in our homes and threshold. Sara, very welcome.
Thank you so much, Tom. Thank you sincerely, because I was honestly moved by how you read aloud the beginning of that short piece of mine on Southall. And it's been now more than a year since the last time I was back in Southall, which has been one of the main places where I conducted fieldwork over the past 4 years. And it's a place, a field, and honestly, a community which I'm really longing to go back and see and just somehow engage with once again. So thank you very much, and thank you for everything you said. It's like I don't feel I deserved so much sort of so much comment today, but it feels really good. And I hope that my very short presentation, because I prepared a quick, short slideshow for you today in usual standard PowerPoint, plus a video clip from the footage that I've been preparing with my co-director within a movie project that we've been trying to film in and off lockdowns for the past few months. So I hope I will not disappoint anyone. And of course, you're more than welcome to stay if it's bearable for you until the end and to engage in a serious conversation, because my idea today was not really to give a presentation, I mean, to present, but then honestly to make the most of the fact that we are all here together. There are 44 participants, I can see, so I really hope we can enjoy our time together, and we can have a fruitful discussion. So let me just start sharing my presentation. As I said, well, the title of this presentation is quite, I think all of you are familiar with how I titled today's discussion, which is Threshold Matters. And I wanted to reflect with you on ethnography and ethnographers as well, especially in spirit of the collective work, the collective endeavor for doing ethnography that I've been carrying out with my colleagues over the past few years on home visits, as something that may happen. I mean, it did happen before, definitely before COVID, before the pandemic and lockdowns. It did happen in everyday interactions for all of us, but also on home visits as a method of research, of ethnographic research, and as a signpost for a discussion on the ethics of research. And then again, I would like to discuss through home visits, through ethnography, what I call domestic ethnography on hospitality. I mean, the title of this series of webinars, which is Xenia, or Xenia, I think, if there's anyone around who speaks Greek, I do recollect that was the pronunciation, at least in ancient Greek. Well, the matter of hospitality is a sort of relationship which needs to be established or needs to be reaffirmed through time, in particular location, where someone, and I'm putting it very plainly, where someone is supposed to be the host, and the person who's invited, who comes in and crosses the threshold, then becomes a guest and possibly a friend. So I would like to reflect with you on this idea of hospitality also through my my work in South Pole. So actually, just to get started, I thought that I needed to go back to the place where everything began for me, especially in emotional terms. And apologies for the really low quality resolution of these pictures, but you can imagine that. I mean, I think that all of us as ethnographers, when we are out for field work, we do not always carry a video camera with us, but most of the times, just to be less intrusive as possible, we do use our mobile phones. So this is a picture which I took on the first floor of the National Sikh Resource Center in Southall. Actually, the picture is overlooking outside. If anyone of you is familiar with West London, outside you may say King Street. I mean, King Street is one of the two main carriageways of the old part of Southall. And what really intrigued me at the time was that picture that my host had placed right on the windowsill. And let's just imagine that there on the first floor of the National Sikh Resource Center, there used to be a Kundalini Yoga Center. And the host of this place was, by the way, a second generation Sikh woman who is a Kundalini Yoga teacher and one of my dearest friends in Southall, actually. Her family of origin, they all come from Uttarakhand, which is northeast India. And the beautiful picture that she had placed there was a place of pilgrimage for many Sikhs, considering that you may see, I mean, I don't know if I'm able to zoom in. Can you see any better if I zoom this in?
Yes.
Okay. So it's called Sri Hemkund Saiji. And as I said, it is a Gurudwara which was established, so a sort of Sikh temple, let's just popularize it here, which was established just in honor of the 10th Guru, Guru Gobind Singh Ji, who was said to have spent there approximately 10 years meditating. So in the eyes of my hostess and the eyes of my friend, the idea of putting this picture there was to somehow to announce the spirituality of the place where all of us, everyone in Southall and from other parts of London as well, other visitors from other parts of London came to practice yoga, but also at the same time to maintain this really intimate connection with their family stories, with the idea of homeland that even a second generation Sikh person could have nurtured in, not really in their home place, but in a place of work. So that was just to get started, sort of unrolling the curtains. The presentation I would like to give you today actually goes through 3 stages. So I think I was compelled in a way to explain a little bit better where I've been working for the past 4 years as a postdoctoral researcher, so within the ERC-HOMInG project. Then I would like to go through, and I mean, I put lots of slides with a sort of combination between theory and empirics. So I would like to go with you through these 3 keywords, which are thresholds, hospitality, and domopolitics, or the politics of home. And through the use of these 3 keywords, I would like to investigate what does home visit may give to the ethnographer, may in fact be useful in order to somehow to announce the collaboration between researcher, researched ethnographers, and informants. And then at the end of the presentation, I'm really looking forward to show you, because this is the very first time I show to any audience external from the project a part of our footage. So the film, I'll be talking about it a little bit extensively later, but the film of Domes and Ropes, it's a documentary project which my collaborator and I, Vajata Paskasmi, have been trying to release since the very beginning of 2020. The only problem was that we were somehow really cut off by lockdowns. So we were not really able in spring 2020 to go on and do the shooting. We had, of course, scheduled. So let us see if I can be quick enough. This is just a short, well, this is just an image where you can see, if any one of you is not familiar with the project where I come from, the project is called HOMInG. homing literally. Of course, we do know that, perhaps you're aware of that. I think that in English language, homing is the fact, it's the sort of trajectories that pigeons do when they try to go back to the place where they come from. And I think that in biology, even salmon do that actually. When they want to go back, they try to go against the current, and they want to go back and sort of deliver their eggs for reproductions. Of course, in homing, as a project which is solidly based in the Department of Sociology and Social Research at the University of Trento, the idea of home was linked with the experience of migration. So the object of the research actually came from a book. The book which laid out the foundation of this project is called The Search for Home, so mapping the space for migrant homemaking, which was written by Paolo Boccani, and Paolo Boccani is the PI, the principal investigator of this project I'm talking about. Well, when I put in this this quote, I thought that well, actually, when everyone in the project is, as we said, a collaboration. Many people have come in and through. About 12 people have worked within this project over the past 4 years. So at the very beginning, we were discussing if our idea of home was unanimously distributed among members of the team. And then in the end, it became clear that in fact, perhaps home is much more fragmented, is much more flatted than common sense would ever experience. At the same time, we tried to, well, actually, I think that we complained with our PI that when he said that only conditions that such those engendered by international migration bring home to the fore as a unique sort of attachment, desires, needs, and dilemmas, all of us were sort of taking as even Tom said, demigrantizing posture, trying to see that perhaps migrants have their own say, have their own experiences in relation to making home, also according to their conditions of mobility, to their being on the move in some ways, either physically or symbolically, but also just to make sure that we reaffirm the universal possibility for people to make home and to search for home. So I'll try just to skip on this very a little bit too much replenished slide. So I would say that the research objects of our project were literally tiptoeing between the idea of home as a process of something which is of an experience and a locus which is multiscalar in fact. So we were looking at homes not only in terms, of course, of private dwellings, of places where people inhabit, where they sleep, where they may have food or share with their kin members and so forth, but also as an idea of home as a cultural product. So home as an idea, home as a notion, and as a discourse especially. The second point which I would like to highlight for you is the fact that we slowly transited from an approach to people's movement from migration to mobility. So I'm not here, of course, recovering the whole mobility paradigm and so forth, but I'm trying to say that we were, I mean, personally, I was kind of skeptical of how initially our sort of top-down framework was using this typology of migrants, which were a little bit too much constrained in our opinion. Of course, we talked about origin and destination countries, the fact that most of the people we worked with, our research participants, were migrants on the conditions of either labor, family, asylum seeking, or refugee issues and so forth. We've been doing lots of longitudinal research. In my case, since I've been I was the first person hired, and I'm the person who's got a longer staying in the project. So it's like I've conducted, even through digital ethnography over the past few months, I've conducted many follow-up interviews. So there was this approach to longitudinality in research. We wanted to make sure that people's conditions, people's experience were were rightly somehow updated over the time. So all of these matters actually were part of some of the project outcomes. So let me just explain briefly, because I think it's worth it to say that there are quite a few books out already from the project. The first one was Thinking Home on the Move. And that first book, it was actually a collection of interviews that were released from people whom, like Safet and Tom, for example, were our guests during seminars we had in presence over the past few years. So if any one of you would like to engage with a sort of conversation across disciplines, like we called it, so a sort of interdisciplinary conversation on the idea of home and mobility, this is a good point where to start. I do not know how much Emerald Press asked for the book, but you can also find some of those interviews on the website, which I've just signposted for you. For the other book instead, which was published by Routledge in the land, we battled with Bloomsbury for a while because the book has been published in the series edited by Rosie Cox and Victor Buckley. So it's the series on home studies, the home series. And the title, Ethnographies of Home and Mobility, but actually its real title for us, I mean, for the people who wrote the book, was Shifting Roofs, is a book I just pinpointed here the titles of the 6 chapters which compose the book. So scales, immateriality, mobility and immobility, temporalities, diversities and inequalities. Let me say that this book is not an edited book. It is multi-authored book. So the 3 authors, Alejandro Miranda Nieto, Aurora Massa and myself, each of us composed 2 of these chapters. What was the rationale behind the chapters? It was a combination of different factors. In a way, the 3 of us had been engaged with field work for over a year already. We used to meet up in Trento and have a sort of brainstorming all of us together. Let us say every fortnight, so I would say every 2 weeks on a medium basis. And then, in my case, since I decided to reflect on immateriality and diversities, I took again a multidisciplinary approach there because I really wanted to combine anthropology, which is the background where I come from, so where my roots are, with material culture studies in the case of immateriality, and with, let us say, I would say even critical race theory, so critical race studies, because in the diversity chapter, I somehow exposed myself to some of the new, perhaps not so new, to some of the theorization that came from the US. And we were really, we were really grateful to Pieretto Daniel Sotelo, who's the person who wrote, the scholar who wrote for us the afterword of the book, which I really, really hope you may have the chance to read, because it's there that finally we could give back the voice to the people we had been working with, because through Pierrette afterward, it came out clear and really loud that the 3 of us, the 3 scholars who wrote this book, were strongly advocating for the right to home, irrespective of people's conditions along their mobility trajectories. So those words in the bottom line, limina, process, and social change, were actually the 3 red threads that run across the book. And I would like to say that those 3 red threads also are coming forth into new books, which are again collective endeavors, so collective writing pieces. One is, both of them are edited collections. One is to be submitted very soon to Berghahn and is edited by myself and my colleague Luis Eduardo Perez Murcia. This title is very dear to me, Can Europe Ever Be Home? Chronicles of Global Migrants, because among the different, let us say, the different methodologies that we employed over these years, participant observation, ethnographic observation, in-depth narrative analysis, focus groups, and so forth. But the collection of life histories was something that everyone was encouraged to do, and was something that, as far as I'm concerned, I really enjoyed doing, and I do keep doing. So it's like even within the constraints of the pandemic these days, I'm trying to keep updated with how the lives of my closest informants are going on. The other book instead, which is already under contract by INISCOE, it's supposed to be out in 2022, and it's going to be in an even wider collection. It's a collection which reflects, as I said, home visits, both from a methodological and an ethical point of view. But we decided to extend the contributors of this book out of the project. So there are not only people from within the HOMInG team, but also some of our really dear colleagues that have entered our networks over these years, because I do think that research is anyway a cumulative practice, and I do think it is collaborative, and I'm really looking forward to come and see you all next for the presentation of this book, whenever they be out, fingers crossed. Okay, let me say, I'd like to move to the core of my presentation today. So I would like to investigate with you how personally I did enter homes, people's homes, the homes of my informants. Although I have some problems with the term informant, but this is something we can perhaps articulate in the discussion. So to be honest, we tried to enter, as I say, private homes and so-called semi-public homes. What do I mean by saying that? Well, first of all, that all of us, in my case especially, I mean, let's say that my background was in social anthropology and migration studies, even before I started this project, this postdoc position. Actually, my whole PhD dissertation was built upon intimate collaboration with 4 families, 4 households, which I've been working with for about 3 years. All of them had some of their team members were based in Italy, in the Po Plains. Some of their, of course, many of their left behind members were back in Punjab. And at the time, I conducted this sort of multi-site research between Italy and Punjab, going back and forth, so that I could I could look at what migration studies says is transnationalism in practice. And I was really, I mean, while the people I worked with in Italy were just, in a way, informants, I would go and visit at their home. They were kind enough to send me back to their places of origin as somehow a special guest for their left behind. So for a couple of months, actually, I spent my time in the Punjab. So every 2 weeks, I would move from one home to the next of the family left behind of my household collaborators in Italy. And this picture I can show you here is a picture of this beautiful remittance house where I spent a couple of weeks. And the two men you can see, they're opening the gates of that gives you access to the house. And it was really emotional to me at the time to visit this place, considering that the 2 second generation youth I used to work with in Italy, so actually the grandchildren of this man, they had not personally been in the home, in that home yet. They'd not been in that house yet, since they had not gone back on visits to India for about 4 years. So I was the first one from Italy to sleep in that house, to have access to the beautiful terrace they had on top, to watch the peacocks from the top of the terrace at nighttime. And it was something really rewarding, and something that also somehow established an even closer rapport between myself and the different family members of this household. So when I say that we did try to enter, not only myself, of course, along my let's say anthropology career, but also my the rest of my colleagues in the HOMInG project, we did try to enter also semi-public homes. I think that especially at the beginning, we were concerned with attending to what we called, and unquote, ways of dwelling in the public space, or in what we defined semi-public space, semi-public homes. These were in particular city park, places of cult, shops, restaurants, and so forth, or anyway, all those hubs for the community where we could find initially, especially at the very beginning of our field work, where we could find people who could be recognized as somehow leaders, or in a way, people who could then be trusted to give us, through snowballing, a long rolling list of newer people to interview. Well, this is something perhaps I haven't made clear, but at the beginning, I mean, for me, it was a real, it was in a way really painful for the first few months to conduct study within this ERC-HOMInG project, because this top-down approach with the necessity to interview as many people as possible in different locations and pretty quickly was something that really clashed with my conception and with my habit of doing anthropology. So in a way, the fact of entering semi-public homes was an escamotage, was a way to do quick and dirty work, in a way, to do quick and dirty interviews with people, but it was also something which I wanted to explore more in depth than what we had began to do. Let me say that I didn't comment on the picture. I just wanted to say something about that picture. Actually, that's another picture that comes from Southall, from Miripiri Gurvara. Well, I'll just give you an anticipation. This is a scoop that there is another piece from our team, from myself and the PI, who's coming out in Religion, in the journal Religion very soon. I think it should be online perhaps next week or something like that. And the piece is going to be called At Home in the Temple. So we wanted to, I mean, we explored actually all 10, there are 11 actually. There are 11 Gurvaras, all in Southall, all in the district, and we conducted participant observation, or better say, in-depth observation in most of these Gurvaras. This is one of the Gurvara where we did most of our observations, and Miripiri is a very interesting place because just from the name, any one of you who's familiar with Sikh studies may know that Miripiri is this sort of conjunction between the temporal and the spiritual power. So it was a place where, in fact, different thresholds, as we said, were being enacted. In any case, and this will become even clearer when I show you this short video clip from our footage, investigating house of worship was specifically interesting for arguing over the idea of threshold, the notion and the performance of threshold. Because as you may all remember, what is sacrum is something that needs to be separated from the rest, that needs to be safeguarded from what is ordinary and needs to be secluded and reserved for something or someone. So there is, within places of worship, there is an even more acute articulation of what threshold may be. So I'm actually, I wouldn't like to spend too much time on those slides, which are really embedded with, let us say, with literature review. I really want anyway to focus on the fact that, in accordance with our project, with this sociological approach and interdisciplinary vocation, most of the literature review you will find in this book as well, which I've just presented, is based on sociology as well. So as far as thresholds goes, for example, let us not only quote anthropological literature, which is there, of course, from Berghahn to Victor Wagner, to Pierre Bourdieu, but let us also consider that there's loads of literature that comes from the early day of sociology, and there I just mentioned Simmel or the Chicago School of, let us say, urban sociology. And I would like to make sure that we all know that, I mean, there's a really a great necessity for interdisciplinarity, in my opinion, to grasp with this issue, to grasp with the fact that thresholds are not only, it's not only in a way, a way to demarcate spaces, but also, and especially like Tom read from our publication, is also a way to bound spaces, to produce spaces of inclusion and spaces of exclusion, which can be, again, as much as sensorial, as symbolic, as material as anything else. This picture here, I just wanted to use some of my repertoires of pictures which I took over the past few years to give you an idea of how threshold may be lived and experienced. And well, as all of you may know, there are many different temples where to enter, and that's the case, for example, with the South Asian diaspora I was working with. So in gurdwaras, either in mandirs, so in the temples, and in masjids, in mosques. It is a prerequisite for anyone, of course, to take off their shoes before entering the sacred space. And I wanted to show you this picture also because it was reminiscent of something that happened right before I entered this jami, so this prayer room. That's not in Southall, it's not in the UK at all. It's a picture I took in Amsterdam because my fieldwork took me also to Rotterdam and Amsterdam. And while I was searching for someone whom I had supposed to meet in this Pakistani established mosque in Amsterdam, it was, and it was, I mean, totally compliant with the rules for admission. It was for 3 days, I tried to enter the place, and for 3 days I was just dismissed and sent off to somewhere else. So the place, the mosque where in the end I was able to get in as a woman, is a mosque run by Moroccan immigrants in Amsterdam. That's also, and I mean, I'm making it really shorter and much easier than it was, but I just wanted to highlight the fact that when we talk about thresholds, we're not talking only about the social and spatial boundaries, so how space is affected by demarcating lines of belonging and alienation, but also how our positions as embodied subjects, as subjects who got an intersections of different social conditions, somehow allow us to enter places, or vice versa, prevents us from doing that. Let me say something about hospitality here. I wouldn't take too much time considering that, well, Tom, of course, is the expert of hospitality. I've even quote one of his publications, but I think it was published about 20 years ago. But I mean, when we talk about hospitality, anthropology is definitely embedded within the experience of hospitality, within the reflection on hospitality. And when we talk about hospitality in anthropology, we have to think back of how our discipline emerged as a situated empirical experience with alterity, with the other and with the elsewhere. And we also have to go back and think about how hospitality, even today, of course, is enmeshed within discourses of travel and tourism, which is something, again, it's not my field of research, so I would like to give you the floor later to discuss about it. If any of you had a chance to read, I'm just making a note, I would like you to go back to that article published in the Royal Anthropological Institute Journal by Candeda Call in 2012. I think that, again, it's a good point where to start to go overboard and go back and try to recover what anthropology has to say about hospitality. Let us say that we already said something before, but I would like to explain a little bit better also through my video clip how hospitality has been definitely foundational to the kind of work that we all been doing, because this sort of relationship, what is again performative, is not given and given once and for all, can never be taken for granted. But the relations between a host and a guest is completely, continuously under change. It's sort of under current wave. So it's very important to recognize, and then we go back to Michael Herzfeld, that in different, of course, in different ethics, in different moralities, there is a sort of obligation. This also comes from our conception, from the classic conception of the guest as a simulacra of a god, for example. So the idea that the host needs to be respectful, to be particularly, to grant some honors to their guests. What I would like to say is that, there are those keywords like conditionality. When I think about conditionality, is the idea that a sound relationship between a host and a guest, a sound relationship of hospitality, is something which is conditional on both parts. So it's like both the guest and of course the host needs to respect some rules to be effectively reciprocal in a way. The gift, if Marcel Mauss explained anything effectively to us, is that the gift is also embedded within relations of reciprocity within the experience and the relations of hospitality. And I've been fascinated, and I've been absolutely, in many of my publications, not only in that publication about the senses of food, but in many other my small publications, even there in Italian as well, there's lots about commensality. So there are lots about people sharing food at home. And the picture I took here is a pretty plain picture. I was at a friend's home. We were in the Netherlands here, and the second son of the family had just come back. So the family had just tried to make everything as Indian as possible on their table, on their home. Otherwise, for everyday food, everyday food was much more plain, much more full with Gouda cheese, or sort of typical Dutch plates. I would like to say, and definitely go back to the idea that food is a potent signifier. I would like to say that food is also somehow possibly an ambivalent practice for hosting, considering that even when I was, with my research participants in Europe, or even back in India, it was really, really hard to say no. So to decline an invitation and to say I would not taste it, or I cannot taste that. So it's like the practice of hosting through food can be really somehow ambivalent and compelling, and needs to be explored even more in depth that we've been doing so far. Let me say something about DOMOPOLITICS before moving towards the conclusion, and of course sort of screening these short video clips we have. Well, DOMOPOLITICS has been a few words that stands through many pages of our book, Shifting Rules. I was not familiar myself with the term when I started this project. I came to understand that it is a term coined within sociology, but also within a tradition of a political approach to sociology. I would say political sociology. It is, it was Wolters who in 2004 sort of coined the idea that, well, it is pretty straightforward. The idea that actually when the state, when the nation, the state, let us say, put some thresholds, boundaries, so delimitate the space, the physical and symbolic space for the nation, that someone else needs to be out, needs to be considered as an alien, as someone who can or cannot enter upon different conditions. Our dear friends within our network, Dylan Duivendak, in 2011, he even somehow tried to expand this notion, and so from an idea of a politics of home, which contains, it'll be also an idea of a politics of home, which somehow, as I said, exclude or even eliminate. And of course, Gassanage never explained DOMOPOLITICS in those terms, but all is different, across the years, always really long established elaboration on the idea of domestication is something to refer back to. The fact that if we go back to the Latin interpretation of what domus is, of what home is, in fact, we should also consider that I think geography, in particular cultural geography, had been from the very beginning much more recipient on how power and power stakes of power and subjugation and abjection are somehow, let's say, imbricated, embedded in the idea of home. Even in the lexicon, even in the language that we use simply to ask someone whether they were tenants or whether they were householders, house owners, and so forth, there is a complex articulation of powers to be exhibited at home. Of course, last but absolutely not least, all the elaboration of feminist geographers needs to be recovered to see how these different scales and intersections of, again, I'm quoting Gassanage, domestication are somehow exhibited and performed at home. Within the idea of DOMOPOLITICS, I would like to recover also this the experience that many of us, myself included, while I was doing some of my field work in Birmingham, this experience of how there is a strong movement. I mean, most of you are based in the UK, so are definitely familiar with what is being called urban humanitarianism. So those movements from the bottom, so the sort of called grassroots movements who try to give, actually, to grant migrants, especially refugees, asylum seekers, who are not granted the status of refugees yet, the right to home, the right to decent housing, irrespective of their legal conditions. So just to move definitely forth the reception of their lives, but just to give people a chance to accommodate in a place and eventually to establish there themselves. Again, whether the minimum thresholds, and I'm using thresholds in a different way now, whether the minimum criteria for being recognized as a denizen, as someone who can have the rights to stay, are met or not. Let me just go back. I mean, when we think about as I said, the movement of the city of sanctuary, well, sanctuary, again, is a term that speaks back to the tradition of the classics, the tradition of those places where, I mean, people could get asylum, but it's also a move that takes me back to this wonderful book which I read many years ago, and it was way ahead of the time. I mean, Mireille Losello wrote this book, I think in 2001, so about 20 years ago again. And post-colonial hospitality was somehow, I mean, I think that Rosello preconized there what could have happened then much later in Europe. She was arguing about the enmeshed position of how hospitality was given, refused, or given upon conditions for the French colonized who went back, I mean, who went to France after being given the rights for independence, after winning their independence, freedom movement, and so after gaining their own political independence in their states of origin. So I'm thinking about Senegal, Burkina Faso, and so forth. And within that book, actually, there was an idea of hospitality which in a way moves forth our interpretation of how history, how global history should also be recovered in our conception of hospitality. Of course, many of us today go back and refer to Derrida, for example, when he said that within the term of hospitality, there is also the same, within the same root, the same etymology, we also have the root of hostility. So postcolonial hospitality is a claim actually foreseeing this interlacement between what could have been and what has been done instead. Two people who were colonized, two people who are in the act of decolonizing themselves and going back to those who were once their, let us say, countries of occupation. I would like very quickly to present to you instead the place where I conducted, apart from Salto, which is due to my art, where the place where I conducted most of my recent field work. The city of Brescia is not well known outside of Italy. Instead, is one of the places that this actually was a newspaper article which came out in 2018, right in the middle of my fieldwork there. And Brescia was considered a sort of model city for multicultural Italy. So model city, well, I would say there are many drawbacks and many things that still don't work either in Brescia, but Brescia is a city-centric, to be honest, and it is a city where about 20, well, almost 30% of the population is of immigrant origins, and to be honest, compared to the standards of Italian cities, this is a quite high statistic. By the way, why did I pick out Brescia? Because the most actually the most feasible minority community of immigrant origin in Brescia comes from India and Pakistan, comes from Punjab. So with my collaborator, and now I'll tell something about Vajat, is my collaborator and friend, Vajata Baskasmi. We met again in 2018. We've been in touch ever since. So it's been part of the project as a research participant, indeed, as a research consultant, and then again, since he's also, he's also a social advocate and a filmmaker. He became my partner in co-directing the movie that I would like to briefly introduce to you now. So the idea behind the movie was to produce, to enter into a process of making a documentary, but which was factually collaborative, but also to enter into a process that could deliver a product, a creative product, where many different views were encapsulated, many different views from three specific minorities. The minorities have been working mainly, so all of these were South Asians with a different religious background. So South Asians with a Hindu, with a Sikh, and with a Muslim background. So we wanted, in fact, as I said, most of us, myself included, were absolutely keen on seeing how the architectural infrastructures could have been better or better or not, better or less threshold for the emplacement of minority communities in the city of Brescia. So we wanted to stage what we called the renovation on the overhauling of Mandir, a masjid, and a gurdwara. And we wanted to capture the different relations between the different stakeholders. Stakeholders could have been, civic parties, but also and especially people who were engaging within these places of cult, within these semi-public homes or community homes. What happened though? Actually, we had scheduled to begin our shooting in February last year, because we wanted to take advantage. As Tom and Safed for sure, we wanted to take advantage of the many different festivals that take place for these three different religions across the the springtime, so we wanted to take advantage of different pilgrimages and ritual processions along the streets, for example, Holi or Baisakhi, and the Eid manifestation, I mean, Eid celebrations after Ramadan and so forth. The point is that, I mean, Italy entered its first phase of lockdown, national lockdown, exactly from the 8th of March to the, I mean, as far as the places of calls were concerned, to the 24th of May 2020. So we were completely, I mean, we were completely suspended, entered into a suspended mode. And what's really more important even is to make clear that we had to renegotiate as soon as the first lockdown ended. We had to renegotiate our possibility to cross those thresholds, to enter again those places of worship, and to be our, I mean, and to be guests, not perhaps so welcome like we could have been months earlier. And I would like to show you this clip and then to discuss very briefly about the clip. I'll just
Io mi sento a casa, sinceramente preferisco l'Italia rispetto all'India, perché comunque mi ha garantito molti diritti e comunque anche, vabbè, anche dei doveri, diciamo, perché essendo comunque cittadina italiana, e io sinceramente preferisco appunto Brescia tantissimo, anche dal punto di vista, diciamo, culturale, per il fatto che comunque ci ha dato appunto la libertà appunto del culto, della religione, quindi il fatto che ci sia un tempio in cui tutti possiamo appunto riunirci e praticare una stessa religione, le stesse idee, il fatto di condividere comunque del cibo tutti insieme senza guardare che ci siano comunque delle differenze tra altre religioni, le caste, quindi questo diciamo che secondo me è già un punto in vantaggio che partiamo. E io sinceramente preferisco l'Italia tantissimo per il fatto che comunque c'è diciamo parità comunque tra una donna e un uomo e comunque io mi garantisce l'Italia, soprattutto anche Brescia, proprio come nazione mi garantisce proprio il fatto che io abbia gli stessi diritti di un uomo e di una donna.
So I'll just go back to the presentation. I've got one last slide, but I actually wanted to speak very briefly with you of the idea Can you see anything now? Okay.
No.
So I just want to comment very briefly on the clip before I try to move on this last slide. And I just wanted to say that, as I said, it's just footage, so we are still in the sort of editing process. So we need to decide what stays in and what we've got something like 40 hours of footage. So I mean, 40 hours to cut down to about 30 minutes would be it'd be a sort of a match. But we got this problem that we do not know how to convey this feeling of estrangement that perhaps you themselves have felt while watching the movie. The fact is that there were three different strands even within this short clip. The first is that we were startled by the securitization of the place, so by the fact that I mean, the Guevara was not accessible like we used to attend it. In fact, I mean, people are counted up, their temperature is taken, they are screened continuously. We were ourselves scolded and reproached many times for not being careful enough, for not, keeping out our sanitary mask, for not, maintaining, physical distance and so forth. So it was for us a challenge to be able to continue shooting within conditions that we were not able somehow to control. The second point is that, I decided to leave in this clip the short video interview of Preeti, of that girl of second generation, because she, like many other interlocutors of ours, was part and parcel of our original idea of seeing how community homes are an effective space, an effective home space for especially the second generation to be part of the city, but to be part of the city, part of the nation, but also to do that through a minority place, for a place which is granted freedom of cult. It is somehow difficult for us now to recover this second dimension. So to keep on, in a way, giving voice to the people we wanted to make the film feature about, but at the same time to witness, to be effective documentary witness of this post-pandemic situation, which is still in the making, because Brescia in the last couple of days has been again affected by new, let us say, smaller local lockdowns. So I would like very, very briefly just to wrap up and to say that I think that this final last straw of my work within the project with the visual ethnographic film, which is coming out hopefully by May, is an important fragment to be added to all the rest of our research. But I would also like to say that in a way, and I think I'm quoting here Max Gluckman when I say that this movie in a way will pay homage to a sort of an anthropology of the concrete, if you want, that makes sense of ongoing situations. So, for example, of people's mobility, people's trajectories over the life course, across different transnational movements, but also and especially of disrupted events, which may be, like in the case of the pandemic, which may be effectively portrayed within this documentary film, but we may also be fundamentally recovered within the threads of people's narrations. And in the book that we will submit to Berghahn as soon as possible, it is actually the value of people's words, of people's life histories and her stories, so of people's personal biographies, is something that we want to make public in a way, of course, respectful of people's privacies and so forth. But we really want to move forth from ethnography of a place to ethnography done with people, and somehow to give back also agency to the people possibly even with including our collaborators within our project, within our drafting project, and even our filmmaking project. So let me conclude here. Thank you very much for bearing with me and for being awfully late. Thank you.